Welcome to another episode of the Dendrite podcast. This is a conversation with Reid Barber, a PhD student in religious studies at the University of Ottawa, supervised by Dr. Vallely. Reid's work sites at the intersection of Vajrayana Buddhism and psychedelics in North America, looking at ethics, pedagogy, and the idea of a skillful means. He came into this field from an unconventional path, starting in environmental engineering, then moving into uOttawa psychedelic-studies microprogram, and then eventually into a master's and now a PhD exploring mystical experiences. We hope you enjoyed this episode, and now here's Reid Barber.
Hi Reid, how's it going, man? How are you?
I'm doing pretty well. Feeling good now that the semester's over. Relaxing a little bit. How are you doing?
I'm doing amazing, man. Thanks for coming to the podcast again. It really means a lot. And you are the second students who come to the Dendrite podcast. So we're
Big
really
honor.
honored to have you, man. Thank you so much. So can you talk a little bit about your background and how you came this whole psychedelics, how you got interested and where you are in now?
Yeah, sure. So my route to get here is a little bit unconventional, I guess you could say. If you're talking about like on paper background, because my undergraduate degree was in environmental engineering.
Okay.
So I did that for 4.5 years, and I was in my I think it was my last semester of my degree when kind of like COVID hit really big, right? So COVID happens, everything gets like shut down, and then basically classes move online, and I'm taking one of my very last classes about, of all things, about Windows. Not Windows computer, but like literal Windows in the side of a building. And I was, a little distracted, I guess you could say, because I wasn't particularly interested in Windows. And I was, scrolling around on like the internet when I should have been paying attention, and I just saw it was an article interviewing Anne Vallely and Monica Williams, the two professors who are kind of the de facto head of kind of psychedelic studies here at uOttawa. And this was kind of before anything really started, but it was more, the article was about how they're trying to get this thing started. So long story short.
Well, how did you see the article? Was it like in your...
Honestly, I was just scrolling just like the news, and it just happened to pop up in my algorithm.
Oh, wow.
Which is funny because at that time, I was reading about psychedelics. I wasn't like a psychedelic like person. I wasn't like super deep in the culture or anything. I was just kind of like interested here and there, reading a few books.
I see.
And then basically I saw this ad, and I thought it was just so fascinating. I was like, people can study this stuff at a university level. I thought it was like a total underground, small group researchers. So seeing it kind of being in the above ground at the university, I was like, oh my God, this is an awesome opportunity. And they were mostly doing it in the humanities and kind of clinical psychology. It was kind of two spheres. So I basically reached out to Professor Anne Vallely just on a whim. I just saw her an email, and I said, I'm super interested in this. My background is not at all related in any means whatsoever, but I'm willing to learn, and I'm really passionate about what seems to be this super fascinating new field. And we basically exchange emails over the next, 6 months maybe, just here and there. And then then at one point she's like, oh, we have this kind of micro program that's running, which is kind of like I guess the way I think about it is kind of like a pilot program for new graduate kind of course loads. Yeah. So then basically she's like, oh, you should apply to this and come on. So I did that, and kind of on a whim. And at this time I was working and all this stuff, and I was like, oh, okay, well, I was kicking myself because I was like, if I don't do this, I'm going to be, always wondering what if, and then end up getting in, participate in the micro program, which is awesome. We can talk more about that. But basically the micro program was so awesome. The professors were awesome. The cohort was awesome. I was like, oh my God, this is great. I want to stick around.
Was that happening during the COVID?
Yeah.
Okay. So how were the classes? Were they like online, I guess?
Yeah. So in the micro program, it's fairly casual in the sense of like your workload. Like you're only taking one class a semester. So you're kind of you're working at the same time. And yeah, at that point in time, they were all kind of this online format because obviously we couldn't meet up in person yet. But honestly, it was kind of good because it actually, in a way, allowed the program to kind of come to be because
I see.
we could bring in all these people from all over the world. Like I remember one of my first class, there's someone from, there's like people from Europe. There was someone from like Dublin, kind of all over the country. We have like a lot of people from like the West Coast coming in. So micro program takes about a year. Did that, and then I was like, hey, I really think this stuff's really cool. Can I stick around and finish out the master's because I have like half the credits at this point? And they're like, yeah, sure, do that. And then, anyways, it just keeps snowballing. I'm like, well, I really like this people, and it's working out pretty well. I'm just gonna keep going along with it, and then
that's amazing.
End up applying to the PhD, and then that's where I am now. I just finished my first year. Yeah.
Awesome. That's great, man. Yeah. So are you doing your PhD with Dr. Ann Vallely as well? Or?
Yes.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah. So I'm in the classics and religious studies department.
Okay.
So I'm doing it with Ann. So we're mostly interested in kind of, like the humanities, philosophy, I guess you call it existential issues.
I see.
And then obviously, of course, religion.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're going to really dig deep into your research in a bit. The funny thing about micro program, or I guess not funny, but the thing is, I was kind of jealous because we did the same thing. I was interested in like psychedelics and all that, and we searched it up. Actually, my friend Saeed, shout out to him, he actually found out about this program. And we thought we could apply as an undergrad, but apparently we can't. So I was like, oh no, we have to have a program like that. So maybe in future, hopefully we can get maybe a similar program or have an option for, I don't know, maybe undergrads who have like some sort of interest or meet some sort of criteria can apply for the program. That would be awesome, man.
Yeah, I would love for that. Or at the very least have undergraduate versions of the course we do, because we get like, there's some like more like general ones that are kind of more of the history of psychedelics that totally undergraduates could grasp.
Yeah, definitely. We have one course called Drug 101, and that's kind of touching it a little bit, but it's not much, so you don't get the full experience of like, psychedelics and like meeting all those cool people. Yeah, totally. Cool. That's amazing, man. So were you at a time that you want to do the PhD with Dr. Ann Vallely, or was it more of a gradual thing and you become interested? Because I guess like when you hear about psychedelics, there's like so many things around it, and there's so much different aspect you can look into it. How did you find humanity, let's say, your passion?
Oh, geez. Yeah. Well, one, I would say that, no, I did not plan on doing the PhD whatsoever. It was kind of like a snowballing interest where I just kind of kept doing this thing where I'm like, the thing with the PhD is you get surrounded by people who are also obsessed about these really, niche topics. Yeah. And then you kind of get into that and you're like, oh man, this is awesome. I want to keep looking into this. I want to keep diving deeper. And then, for me, I kind of came to a realization where I'm like, basically in our world, in our culture in Canada, the only place you can really continue to do that is in the university institution. So I was like, okay, this is kind of my one route here. So I kind of kept going on with that for that reason. And then humanities specifically, I didn't start out with that either. I came into the program thinking I was like, oh, I'm gonna become like a psychedelic assisted therapist. It was originally kind of how the program, micro program was.
I mean, based on your background, like environmental science, I guess you took some science courses.
Oh yeah. No, I did. I took biology. I took chemistry, ton of chemistry, calculus, math. So I was like, I come in kind of originally from that angle. So I'm mostly focused on like the STEM science side. And that's just because that's just what I knew. And that's what most people know, because that's kind of where the priority kind of lies in the university institution. And then it was through taking these classes that I kind of begin to get exposed to these other elements of the field that exist. And the questions, it was like all the whys
I see.
that really kind of hooked me, where it's like, it's like, okay, yeah, let's take like a really obvious example. It's like a lot of research is showing that if you have this thing that's called, a mystical experience, you have better therapeutic outcomes. Put pretty simply, a lot of research is showing that. And, and it's really good because a lot of people are going like, oh, well, why is that producing a better outcome?
Right.
How can we use that and make that more kind of a guaranteed experience in therapeutic environment? But I was kind of more interested in, I'm like, what is this mystical experience thing? Why are we all just being like, oh, yeah, no, I know what a mystical experience is, and then moving on with their day. I'm like, why is no one talking about this? So then that kind of leads me to kind of getting into those, that side of it, which is more like the experiential, and then in the philosophy,
right.
and the history, and kind of all of that stuff, because those bigger questions kind of keep coming up again and again in the research, and then for many, many different reasons, they kind of get put aside.
I know.
So like one of my favorite ones is I remember reading this one study, and this one woman who was participating, she has this, it sounds like a very profound experience with psilocybin mushrooms. And then she said, after the fact, she said it was so strange that these men in white lab coats were asking me on a scale of 1 to 10 how much I felt like I met God or something like that. And she was like, it was just such a weird, surreal experience, and it made no sense to me. And then that kind of resonated with me too, where I was like, that doesn't seem like the right way to go to go about this. But yeah.
Amazing. That's great. I mean, one thing about psychedelics is that like you perfectly put it, that there's like two sides. There's like scientific aspect and there's like humanity. The more of a why question, I guess it's more towards the humanity, history, and then how is more of a scientific aspect of it. But as you mentioned perfectly, it's kind of pushed down sometimes. And I guess, what do you think is the reason?
I mean, so I don't think well,
because actually, go ahead. But I think you go ahead first. Sorry.
Well, I was just gonna say, it's a really complicated question. I think that there's there's a big picture answer, and then I think that there's kind of a more narrow answer. So big picture is that, and I'm gonna be talking from my personal experience. I don't want to try to speak for anyone else, but there is a general, how should I put it? In Canada, like we'll talk about the Canadian context, there is this kind of slow process, and we're noticing this gap grow bigger every year. There is this elevation of the STEM perspective, and there's a devaluation of the humanities perspective. And it's really interesting having had a foot in both of those worlds, seeing that happen. And I think there's a lot of reasons for that existing on a societal level. And then there's also on the more kind of micro level, like in the field itself, the reality is that a lot of the funding and the money is tied up in clinical psychology, ethnobotany, kind of that world. And again, and it makes sense, right? Because again, one, when the government disperses money to the university institutions, the STEM programs are usually favored. One, because they tend to be more expensive to run. And from like a government level or a wide society level, there's more of a tangible output, right? So for example, like if someone could say, I'm improving therapeutic outcomes, that's like really great for the government. They're like, oh, this is really good for us, good for the society. We're going to give you a lot of money. Humanities is a little bit harder, right? Because it's a little bit more abstract. It's not, you can't so easily point to a cause and effect for giving money.
And there's no way to like measure it specifically as it is for like other therapeutic, for example.
Totally. But it's so necessary, and it's so linked. Like all of these aspects of the field are so linked, right? I think that one of the most interesting things that the humanities can offer is this idea of like we don't need to reinvent the wheel with psychedelics, right? There's so historically there's like cultures who have used these things safely for thousands of years. In contemporary, it's like, why are we can't ignore like the underground world and like the effect that they have, because the reality is that the work done in the underground, that momentum, that inertia that was created in the underground, did eventually carry over to the clinical stuff. So yeah. So anyways, there's many facets, but it, obviously I'm a little bit biased, but I do think it's a little bit sad that the humanities perspective isn't given
enough value
enough value, or like a seat at the table in the same way, right?
Yeah, no, definitely. I feel like it's because it's harder. That's like people think, oh, humanity is easy, don't worry about it. Or it just like you just talk about psychology and it's nothing too complicated. We're all like those people, oh, we're having like chemistry and we trying to like figure out this molecule and it's nothing compared to what you guys are doing, But at the end, like the big question, I think it's harder to like answer, But hopefully with doing these podcasts and talking a little bit more about it, we can maybe just a little bit make a difference, hopefully.
Yeah, totally.
All right, so back to your research. If you can explain what is it exactly that you're doing right now?
Yeah, so the task with every person writing a PhD is like, how can I condense this into short enough so people's eyes don't glaze over when I begin to tell them what I'm doing. So basically, in general, my kind of research area is Buddhism. So how does that interact with psychedelics is probably the first question people are thinking about. So in Buddhism, specifically, I'm looking at Vajrayana Buddhism, which a lot of people know as like Tibetan Buddhism.
Right.
But I'm specifically looking at it mostly as it exists here in Canada and North America. So there is this kind of concept, philosophical or pedagogical concept, basically how lamas, teachers in this tradition, how they teach, how they go about it, what their logic is and all that. And there's this kind of concept called skillful means that exist. So in Buddhism, there is these things called the precepts, which are kind of like moral guidelines. You could kind of tacitly use the word rules, that in general, Buddhists are instructed to follow if they wish to reach enlightenment.
I see.
However, though, sometimes lamas, teachers in this tradition, can use methods or teach in ways that actually contradict the precepts if they have kind of determined that it's worth it because they're going to get their students closer to this idea of enlightenment. So where psychedelics kind of come in is that this concept is like, it's very like nebulous. It's very like lived. There is a lot written about it, but how it's written about and how it's lived is two very different things. And it's super context dependent. So for me, a lot of it, there's like a big question mark around, well, what exactly is this skillful means thing? So then you have psychedelics kind of come into the picture. And, being in North America, we have like a fairly definite psychedelic presence. And it's no secret that there's kind of this coming together of psychedelics and Buddhism. They interact in our culture. So
well, I'm a little bit confused. So is it about like the experience that kind of have some sort of similarities with Buddhism, or
yeah? So it's a little. So basically, a lot of people in North America have kind of find themselves practicing or participating in Buddhism kind of after a psychedelic experience. I won't say it's not everyone. It's not like an enormous trend or anything, but it is an effect that does happen. And a really great example of that is that in just earlier this spring, there was the first psychedelic Buddhism conference that happened. So you kind of have these like two fields. You have people who are looking at people who proclaim to be Buddhists, and that are trying to integrate in these psychedelic practices, like consumption, like centralizing it within the Buddhist model, and then trying to interpret it through like a Buddhist worldview.
I see.
That's one side. There's other people looking at that. I'm not really looking at that so much. I'm more looking at basically how the traditional, we call them like lineage holders, how the traditional lineage holding lamas are basically occasionally using or instructing students to use psychedelics as skillful means.
Okay.
Because psychedelics, there's something called the fifth precept, which basically just says you can't consume intoxicants. So most people are like, okay, well then obviously psychedelics are out of the question, which again, what most people assume, or the people who do use them just kind of flaunt the rules, and they're like this like new, Western manifestation of Buddhism. But I found in my experience through anecdotes, talking to lamas and all this stuff, that there actually are some traditional lineage holding lamas who have occasioned psychedelics in their Dharma training. And I was really curious as to how do they reconcile that? Like how do they go about that? And that's how I kind of came across this concept called skillful means, which is basically this idea that yes, it might contradict the precepts, but we've determined that the benefit of doing that gets you closer to enlightenment than the detriment. I'm basically I'm not so much looking at psychedelics as a practice that Buddhists are doing, that they're taking the psychedelic for the psychedelic experience. I'm looking at it more as kind of I call it like an edge case.
Right.
So basically this kind of fairly controversial thing that people do, and I'm using that as a case study to look at how this kind of philosophical concept called skillful means is applied. Because psychedelics are such a boundary thing, it's very controversial. It can reveal how certain philosophical, ethical, and pedagogical concepts are stretched, reinterpreted, and understood in the Western context. I hope a little bit about that makes sense. It's a pretty
So what's
niche,
what's the process? Do you read massive amount of articles or anecdotes?
Yeah. So the reality is that there isn't actually a lot of research into this right now.
Yeah.
So you do read a lot. So at the beginning, you kind of go, okay, I have this glimmer of an idea that I want to research. You have a kind of an intuition. A lot about getting started with research is intuition.
Yeah,
I have an intuition that this exists and it's here. So then you go into it and you start reading a lot about it. And then you have this kind of, in your first year, you have this thing called the proposal process, which is basically you have to produce a document to the department which says, here's this thing I want to research and here's how I'm going to go about it. So during that process, you're reading a lot of stuff to kind of inform your opinion, better inform your hypothesis, on. And then you kind of submit that document, and then it gets approved.
Right.
After that, you have a ton of reading to do. There's a lot of reading in graduate school. So you have kind of your literature review and your kind of comprehensive examination, which is kind of, they all kind of inform each other. But basically, it's reading a ton of books, articles on your particular topic.
Okay.
So your literature review is that if you're in the humanities, your dissertation will have a literature review at the beginning, which is basically you're stating, here's the state of the field that's interested in this topic that I'm looking at. And it's demonstrating that you've kind of looked at all the angles.
I see. Okay.
And then you also have this thing called the comprehensive examination, which is very similar. You do the same thing. You just read a ton of books about your specific topic and about the general field. Except the big difference is that literature review goes into your dissertation, and the comprehensive examination, that's when you kind of go into the room and they kind of grill you about are you an expert in the field, basically. And then once you pass that comprehensive examination, then you kind of go from doctoral student to PhD, and if you ever seen in parentheses C, that's you can start using that title once you pass your comprehensive exams.
I see. Well, thanks, man. Yeah. Nobody could explain it this amazing.
Oh my god, it took so I don't even want to tell you how many years it took me to figure out that it was that simple.
No, I asked so many people and nobody did it better than you.
Yeah,
you did a great job. That's great, man. But I guess a lot of work, hey? You have to do, as you mentioned, a lot of readings.
Yeah.
Wait, so what step are you in now?
So I just finished my thesis proposal, and then you basically present it at something called a colloquium, which is basically they send out kind of an email blast to the department and you go basically give a presentation, like a general overview of like your research. And that like in itself is like 20 minutes. So if you thought before I was kind of rambling about my topic and it was unclear, I had to condense 20 minutes, and that 20 minutes is condensed down from probably what should be actually an hour.
Oh my god.
So anyway, so I just completed that.
Okay.
And you present, and then you kind of get asked questions. You're kind of given some feedback on what to change or what to keep. And then you apply that feedback to a written document that is obviously linked with your presentation.
Okay.
And then you give that written document to your supervisor and then 2 second readers. And basically what they do at that point is that they assess you, and it's not so much assessing the validity of the idea. At that point in time, that should have already been kind of assessed with your supervisor and talking with other people. It's more like, have you done the prep work, and does the department have faith that you kind of know what you're doing and you can conduct the research? And then, so you do that. So I just finished that part. So now kind of the next step is for me is just finishing off a little bit of classwork that I still have to get, to get credits just like undergrad. And then, then it's kind of beginning to figure out the research plan, getting ethics approval, kind of all of that process is kind of next.
I see. Interesting. And then I guess you do some sort of like interviews, and then like how's the research look like in the humanities?
Yeah. That's a great question.
Yeah.
So in general, you can kind of look at, I'm trying to think in our department, you can kind of look at focus around the past and people that are no longer alive and things that have already happened, or you can kind of look at our contemporary world. And obviously that binary distinction, like everything kind of exists on a spectrum between these kind of 2 points, right? So you can kind of do like the textual analysis side, which is where for example, like Adele Reinhardt, who is Professor Adele Reinhardt, she's like the head of like the religious studies department. And for example, her work is a lot of looking at taking an analytical, scholarly look at historical biblical documents. So all of her work is, from what I understand, based on reading texts from the past, all about textual analysis, finding maybe like more documents to provide context around it, what we call hermeneutics. And so that's kind of one aspect of it that's quite interesting. And a lot of people also in like religious studies, they confuse it with theology, which I don't blame anyone, because that's what I thought what it was too. Because my biggest thing about religious studies, I'm like, religious studies has got a major branding problem. We need to market ourselves better. So, like a lot of people think like, oh, you're reading the Bible or whatever, and and like some people do that, but it's more like a critical, scholarly, like or historical look at these documents and their effects and what they kind of led to. So for example, Adele Reinhardt, so I'm just gonna keep using this example. She would look a lot at kind of the origins of anti-Semitism, and basically looking at these really old documents and seeing if you can kind of begin to draw these like causal links across history of these kind of like developing anti-Semitism. So that's one side. And then you also have kind of the contemporary lived side. So religion, culture, enormous category. So it's huge what you can look at. We have people looking at, for example, how like Islam is embodied and practiced in Canada, or like specifically or how like women specifically, that's a big one in Canada. And then you also have looking at diaspora, links between for example, diaspora, how they link their homeland and to here, and kind of many different religious traditions. We have Christianity, Islam, Judaism are big ones. And then we even have the non-religion project here under Professor Laurie Beeman. So like that's really interesting. A lot of people think religious studies department, non-religion. How does that make sense? But it's quite interesting. Like they're looking at how in Laura would hate me if I said this, quote unquote secular society, how people go about and make sense of the world in that side. So it's like, yeah, you have like your atheists, but you also have your agnostics, you have your spiritual but not religious, you have the I'm culturally, I feel culturally Jewish, but I don't necessarily feel connected to the spiritual aspect of it. And like all of these kind of identities that can't be conventionally categorized into religion, basically they're looking at how do those people go about their lives? How do they understand themselves in the world? How do they make sense of the world in a society that, for example, less and less people are identifying as the dominant religion Christian. Every census that we get here in Canada. So there's that aspect as well. And then you also have a smaller aspect, which is looking at what we call Dharma traditions. Okay. So that would be like your Hinduism, Buddhism, and Jainism mostly here. So it's kind of a small cohort. So I'm kind of in that world. And then of course you have the psychedelics side, and the psychedelic side it's very wide in what it is. So it's like, you have like traditions, religious traditions that have prioritized or centralized psychedelics, and then you have how people are using it today, and then you have how does it affects people, psychedelic experiences affect people's existential health. And I know you had Nathan on, and Nathan's looking at trip reports and how that's kind of like a modern kind of new religious text being born. So it's enormous. I mean, I have one of my friends, Karen, she's doing work on love and the role of love in the psychedelic experience and how that filters in and affects your everyday life. So it's an enormous field. So anyways, short answer is that religious studies seems super simple, but it's an enormous world of things, philosophy, history, textual analysis, lived religion, on and on.
Right. Wait, so religious studies, is it like a master program, or like I'm trying to figure out how psychedelic is involved? Because we have the own psychedelic master program, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Are those like combined with each other, or two separate things that kind of share some similarities? Or
so the kind of the history with the psychedelic studies micro program, right? You have the coming together of Professor Anne Vallely, who's in like religious studies, and then you have Professor Monica Williams, which is in clinical psychology. And from what I understand, this is just what I think happened. I can't say with any certain authority, but it seemed that the religious studies department was just the department that was open to hosting this originally. I'm sure it was more complicated than that, but like that's how I kind of perceived it, because surprisingly to many people, the religious studies department is like one of the most progressive departments, which is so not what people think, but it's such an open department to like into anything that you're interested in. So it originally the micro program gets housed in the religious studies. And so then, but now as time's moved on, now we have the full-fledged masters, right?
So master came after.
Yes.
The micro.
So the masters actually came after I finished my masters. So I finished the micro program. The full-fledged masters didn't exist yet. So how I ended up in the religious studies department was I was basically like, hey guys, I really want to continue this research. I really want to continue being a part of this. What can I do? And the religious studies department was like, yeah, we'll take you in. So that's kind of how I ended up there. But so now the full-fledged masters, which this was, it just finished out its first year. It'll have its own title. And I'm actually not sure if there's like, I think there is you can graduate the science side, or you can graduate with the Master of Arts side.
I see.
I'm not entirely sure, because there are kind of those two streams, right? Of that kind of, are you more interested in the clinical psychology side, or are you more interested in the humanities side?
I see.
And then as of right now, there's no specific PhD technically under the title of psychedelics and consciousness studies, or I think that's the title of it now. but that doesn't really matter too much anyways. I mean, when you get to your PhD, it's more just like getting into a particular department that will support your work. Yeah.
I see. Wait, so you did your master in religious study, not the psychedelic one?
Yeah. So technically, I graduated. Yeah, in religious studies.
Okay.
Which was a bit of a trip in and of itself because if I went back, I don't know, at the beginning of my undergraduate degree and said, it's like, you're going to get a master's in religious studies, I would have thought I was going crazy. But yeah,
Oh, wow.
just the way it worked out.
Cool. So the master program, I guess it's a 2-year program. And then, can you talk a little bit about how the structure of the program is designed? Is it like mostly research-based or you take classes? Like, how is it going to work?
Yeah. So from the humanities perspective, you take a good amount of classes. Usually in your graduate degree, you take on average about 2 classes a semester, which is obviously way less than your undergraduate.
Yeah.
Some people take like 3 if they need to and stuff like that, or even 4. But usually it's standard 2, maybe 3. And so you do that for kind of like your first year. Actually, probably your undergrad, you probably do it mostly the entire time.
Yeah.
So in the humanities, there's not like labs that there is as in STEM, right? It's more you're writing final papers in all these classes for the entire semester. So kind of what is a final, paper in the humanities? It's kind of like a research project that you kind of do the entire semester. So in a way, that kind of is the humanities lab, but obviously you don't have to be in like a chem super lab or anything like that, right? So you actually kind of begin formulating ideas and doing research even while you're doing classes in the undergrad. It's like you'll be kind of testing ideas. Most of the professors are really awesome in the sense of like, even if you can kind of tangentially relate a research idea to the class, they'll let you do it if they think it's going to support your master's or your PhD research. So that's one aspect of classes. And then you also have your thesis or you have your major research paper are kind of the 2 avenues that you can take. So your thesis is kind of like a trial run for like a doctoral dissertation. It's just much shorter, a lot less involved. And that you'll basically prepare your proposal and kind of think about it, formulate it while you're doing your classes. But then kind of after you finish your classes, that's where you kind of go full on into it. And then kind of at the same time, you're also doing a literature review. So
it counts as credits, right? Like
yes.
Just doing the preparation to like develop the thesis, or
So I mean, it's credits in the sense that you'll be kind of formulating your ideas in your coursework, like in your classes. So you'll get credit for those classes. And then you do have one class like that's called your thesis proposal class. And you do get credits for that as well. It's mandatory if you do the thesis proposal. And then after that you do your research, and like the literature review is kind of technically its own item or class or whatever you want to call it. But that you kind of do in preparation for the thesis proposal. And then you do your research, and that will probably I would imagine for most people it'd probably take about a year from like prep to doing the research and then writing it. It's kind of around that like a year, I would guess. Or you can take another route, which is doing a major research paper, which is like if you do that option, you take more coursework, but the major research paper is significantly shorter than a full thesis. And it's usually much more truncated in its view, and that you have to complete in 4 months rather than a year. And there's different reasons why you would do each. One might be simply you want to just take more coursework. Often, a lot of the time, it's encouraged to do the thesis if you want to do research in academia after. Obviously, because it looks like a thesis, and the university can look and be like, oh, they did a good job on this, and then they'll probably do a good job on the thesis.
I see.
But you still can also get in with the major research paper. I did the major research paper, and I got in. But that was just more because my particular circumstance.
I see. Okay.
But yeah, and then I think that's mostly it. And then you get your thesis reviewed, and then you get the yay or nay, and then you graduate with your master's.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Amazing. So I want to ask you this: wasn't it hard for you then to like write, and because you came from like a science background, and usually, like at least from my experience, why I chose science because I wasn't really interested into like writings and readings. So and then you shift all of a sudden to a whole different field that you don't get to like go to labs or pipetting, you know. So how was that for you?
Yeah, it was certainly intimidating at first. Obviously, going from engineering, graduating, you know, working for whatever, like a year and a half, and then going into this. It was like certainly intimidating. I remember my first class, I was like, oh my God, like I know nothing.
And you see all those other people like, asking questions.
Yeah, I know. Like they're like, I was like, oh my God, they're gonna be like, you know, whipping out like theorists and like quoting them verbatim, and I'm just gonna look like such a big idiot. And honestly, I was really pleasantly surprised in how open everyone was.
Okay.
And how actually easy it was to kind of get adjusted to it. That's not to say that it was easy work, but it's kind of trial by fire in a way, right? Like you get into your first class and it's like, here's all these readings, like, you know, in graduate studies, like you're just reading all the time. So you're kind of are just forced. It's kind of like, you just got to kind of pick it up and figure it out real quick. But also at the same time, you know, during during COVID and a little bit before COVID, at the tail end of my degree, I really started reading a lot more about things that interested me. So, for example, psychedelics, right? I started reading a lot of books about psychedelics. So I was kind of, I guess, prepping myself for the endurance that it would take. But no, I have to say that there was an intimidation aspect and a learning aspect. You had to read a lot, but it's easier than you think it is if you're passionate about it. That's the biggest.
Yeah, that's the key.
That's totally the key. That's where I tell people, I'm like, you know, you truly can do like whatever your undergraduate degree is, you can basically make anything happen. Like you can go into any field, and I say that really conditionally, in the sense of like, if you're really passionate and you have the will to make it work, because usually there are ways to get into the programs. For example, my first semester at master's, basically after talking to all the department heads, all that stuff, and getting in, I was basically like, oh my God, this guy's not going away. so they let me in, and they said, okay, the condition though is that you have to take, what was it? It was like 2 or 3 undergraduate courses. In your first semester, and you basically have to like ace those, to kind of keep going on. So I did that. And I'm actually quite glad they did, because it really did give me the kind of like that footing to get started.
I see.
But again, honestly, I was surprised at how quick, you know, your mind can change the way it thinks when you are fully immersed. Kind of the same way that like French immersion or language immersion works, right? When you're like, when all of your friends in your cohort are talking about this stuff all day, all of your classes are about it all day, all of your readings are about it all day,
you automatically
you enter into that mindset faster than you think you would. And then at that point, and then like your STEM background becomes a huge strength, because you're like, I have this new humanities perspective and I have this STEM perspective. So for example, we were reading in one of the psychedelics classes, I don't know if the title is the same anymore, but it was basically like a survey or an overview of the field of psychedelic studies. Obviously, a large portion of that is clinical therapy, biochemistry, ethnobotany. And it was really awesome because I could totally read those papers and understand the chemistry and everything behind it. And, you know, obviously for humanities, the exact chemistry isn't, you know, too important. But it gives you that wider, more connected picture, and then allows you to make those connections. More easily.
No, definitely. Yeah. Well, there you guys, you have it. If you're, because mostly our audience are from science field.
Yeah.
So if you want to check out humanities,
Well,
here's the example. And
yeah.
you had no problem.
No, yeah, you can do, and honestly, like I think more science people in humanities would be awesome. And I would say that with a condition. The condition, though, is that you have to buy in entirely. It doesn't mean you need to, like, have that perspective forever, but you need to buy fully in and kind of and embrace the world, embrace that view, because then you realize you're like, oh, you know, these aren't competing views. Like, you know, like a lot of people think like, oh, you have this kind of like idealistic humanities perspective, or it's like, oh, I know I'm like a realist, you know, I'm like a physical materialist, and like these things, they're a lot of times seen as polar opposites. But really what you kind of begin to see as you get deeper into it, they're just complementary perspectives. They're looking at two different things. It's like, like, for example, like neurology. Like, neurology is like great for explaining like how the brain works and how these things interact with and you know, why chemically they operate that way. But, you know, it can't explain the experience and like of that. I mean, it can try to, and it does. But often I find those explanations are really lacking. Yeah. And you need these complementary expect. I'm a firm believer that all of these need to be a part of the same picture to get kind of like a holistic worldview of these really complicated things. Yeah.
Do you know if anyone did the opposite, like coming from humanities?
And then go into STEM? That I don't. I don't think I know anyone personally.
Would you think it would be harder?
I think it would be difficult to catch up. And that's not because I don't think that STEM is inherently more difficult or complex than the humanities are. However, though, there are...
I think they're less welcoming.
I would agree with that. They are definitely less welcoming. There's more of like, you need to have it figured out already. But just like, you know, STEM, there's all of these systems and tools that exist. For example, like, you know, engineering, it's like thermodynamics. Yeah, it's obviously it's a theory and all that stuff. But it's also a tool to understand the world from a certain perspective, right? So a lot, for example, like thermodynamics or chemistry is a really good example of this too, right? Is that learning how to use chemistry as a tool to better understand the world. Because that's what science is. We're trying to better understand the world and our place in it. Learning to use that tool of chemistry takes a long time. There's so many elements of it. There's so many facets. You know, the instruction manual's enormous. So it takes a long time to get up to speed before you can really begin applying those things. And then once you really master that, you can begin applying it very skillfully in the world around you to better understand. Humanities, I think, is kind of the opposite in a lot of the ways, where there certainly are a lot of systems and extremely complex theories, worldviews, and lenses that you can take that take a long time to catch up. But in general, I would say that initial hump is a little bit smaller. I see. However, though, it's opposite in the sense of that once you know how to wield that tool, let's say like a good example in humanities, like it's like Foucault and Foucault's worldview, and like a lot of people like Foucauldians, they call themselves, you know, will use that to interpret the world around them. Now, when they actually, let's say they've mastered that lens and they begin to apply it onto the world, that aspect, how to apply it, why to apply it, how to interpret the results, in my experience, much more abstract and less straightforward than, for example, results that come out of a lab. Right, I see. Obviously, not always the case. I can't make a blanket statement on either. But in a general sense, that's kind of how in my experience how I've found it. So so I guess how do I put it? It's like, what's the saying? It's like easier to learn, but maybe hard to master kind of thing.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay, interesting. Well, you explained it perfectly well, and now I have a good idea of like what are the difference? Because usually, like when we go to university, sure, at the beginning we know what we are interested in, but you never know. And you have this discussion with like so many profs and all the other people, and all they say is basically do what you love, and then you figure it out.
Yeah.
Like, don't try to waste time to see, what I'm like, what should I do? Or like, just try. If you don't like it, then change and go do something else that you like, you know?
Yeah. And if a good sign too is that if you would do it or research or whatever this thing is, if you would do it on your own time anyways, even if you weren't getting into school, then like that's a really good sign. And I don't mean like you don't need to be conducting studies or reviewing papers, but I mean the sense of like, you know, like a lot of people in psychedelics, you know, are you familiar with like the website like Arrowwood?
No.
So there's a really great website called Arrowwood. It's called the Vaults of Arrowwood. And it, you know, it came to be in the 90s, I think. And it kind of still looks like it's on the 90s. But it's this like enormous website that's like a vault of tens of thousands, if not more than that, trip reports, substance data, dosing data, where these things come from, history. It's just like an enormous repository of information. So the reason why I bring that up is that a lot of people are interested in psychedelics. They might, you know, start with like, I'm obsessed with this website because I just find it, I want to learn about all these different substances because I'm just fascinated about it, or I'm fascinated hearing about these people's experiences. And you know, you look that up on your own time, or even if you're interested in like forums, or if you're watching tons of podcasts, like I would say that even those things count because it's showing that you have, the curiosity and the passion's already there. And I think in that sense, I would totally agree with them. Like that is what brings you across the finish line. Because in graduate school, like you need that, or you will be driven insane because it becomes your life in a lot of ways. Like you're just surrounded by it at all the time. So you have to kind of, love it.
Yeah.
You know, that's what I say. Sometimes it can drive you a little bit crazy. But
if you love it, you're gonna.
But then you come back to it eventually. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
That's amazing. I think there's actually a book called Bibles for Drug Users or something. I don't know if you heard of it or not, but
yes, I think so. I think I know what you're talking about.
Do you think it's valid? Like the guy is actually legit? Because I think what he did basically tried all the drugs and write down his experience. But I guess the website that you mentioned is more relevant because you get to see like different perspective, not just one guy.
Yeah. Okay. So obviously, that one I'm not familiar with, but I get the gist of what you're saying. Yeah. You know, it's
because it's also like the thing with psychedelic is also like very subjective as well. Like the experiences you have in your life and like, you know, so.
Well, so that's the thing. I think that, and this is the thing to be humanity, is that you get comfortable with yes and no answers or stuff like that. So I'm going to say that I think from this person's perspective, they're probably correct. And that they've figured out how, and through their experience and where they find themselves in their lives, that they've kind of figured out this pantheon of experiences that come from particular substances.
Yeah, I think it's more about like safety too, like how to take it, when to take
it. Safety, I would say that I think that's where you get kind of the more what you could call you know, some people might want to call objective. I don't really like using those words being in humanity, but like let's call it like materially based like answers where it's like I think there is like a standardized, like you can standardize like the safety. Actually maybe are you thinking of the T-Call and P-Call, the book? It's like Tryptamines I've Known and Loved by the Shulgins.
No, it's the book that basically, I think it's literally called Bible for Drug Users. Yeah.
The reason I bring this up, there's this another book by these, basically these two very famous chemists, the Shulgins. And basically they did a very similar thing as they basically extracted and synthesized like an enormous hundreds and hundreds of different chemicals and then tried it on themselves. And then kind of that same thing with like safe dosages, you know, safe synthesis and all that stuff. So I think that's really important. And for example, that's where science comes in, where it's like, we need to be able to safely and responsibly get these things. But for the subjective experience, I think it's difficult for, you know, one person to make any statement about. I think you can make statements about general trends that people will encounter on certain substances, but making like hard and fast statements, I think is quite it's quite difficult. For example, like let's take like salvia, like salvia divinorum. Like that experience that people have, there are qualities of it and trends that kind of come up again and again and again that seemed very different from, for example, I don't know, like MDMA or something like that. But it's weird. We know that those are there, but it's difficult to actually draw a box around the exact qualities of each. We kind of know that they're a little different. So I think that each person. I think there's general trends. I think there's maybe certain things definitely bias you towards certain experiences. But yeah, subjectivity, huge, enormous effect. How you meet the experiences in the moment, and how you interpret those. Our interpretations of things happen so lightning fast. It's like, you have the integration period after, but you're also kind of processing the experience, reinterpreting. There's kind of, you have this like dialectical experience with the experience itself. And because psychedelics are so subjective, your interpretation then affects how the experience is manifesting, and you have this like kind of mutual feedback loop that goes down. So I think those things are really important. But I think that people would probably be in a best spot if they said, like, let's say this person's calling it their psychedelic Bible. And it's like, let's say it's like, I don't know, this guy's name's Phil, and it's like, it's Phil's psychedelic Bible. That's true for him. And I don't want to discount that it's not true for him. It's true for him. But I think viewing it as like, their version of events, super valuable to look at, but you'd fall into a trap of reducing experiences to that, or using that as like the standard of experience. Again, like if you're in the psychedelic, world long enough, in my master's research, which people would probably actually find, I say the general audience would probably find much more interesting than my PhD research, which is fair. I looked at, like thousands of trip reports on DMT Nexus, which is another website. And you'll notice that there are trends, but like the staggering multiplicity of experiences and encounters. Like the moment you think you're like, can pin it down on something, like someone has this radically different experience, and you can end up throwing up your hands up and you're like, geez, what are we even doing here, trying to like isolate them.
So those websites, do people just go online and write about their experience, or
I mean, they're pretty they're pretty kind of tight communities usually. But there's like different ones. So like Erowid it's called like the vaults of Erowid, because it's kind of, people can put their trip reports, chemical data, extraction data, all that stuff. But from what I understand, it's more like it's kind of like a bin in which people are trying to make like this like really great kind of like academic, like citizen science academic resource. That's kind of one. And then you have something like called like the Psychonaut Wiki. And the Psychonaut Wiki is kind of looks at a lot of that aggregated citizen science data, and then kind of makes like a psychedelic Wikipedia, where it talks about all this stuff, and then it references, obviously like same as Wikipedia, has all these references to like where they got the info from. And then you have spaces like DMT Nexus, which is kind of more a community. I mean, Erowid certainly has a community, but like DMT Nexus is a lot more about, it's like a forum, so it's like a lot more about interaction, community building, and they also kind of have their own wiki page. So on somewhere like DMT Nexus, you have people doing trip reports, but that's only an aspect of it. You have forums, you have people talking about and interpreting these experiences and trying to figure out basically what's going on in the world and in their own life after the experience. So so you have community, you have kind of the Wikipedia page, you have citizen science. And again, it's kind of all naturally kind of comes out of the undergraduate, the underground, from obviously the years of like prohibition and everything like that. Yeah.
Cool. So back to psychedelics again. One question that I always struggle, I guess, or trying to like explain it to people who don't see the value, or they think of psychedelics as like a shortcut.
Yeah.
What do you have to say about that?
Well, the first thing I'd say is like, what kind of shortcut? Like, what are you getting? What are you getting to?
For example, like higher levels of consciousness,
Yes.
because they say it takes a lot of practice. Some people do it by like praying, for example.
Yep.
Some people do it by meditation.
Yeah.
All that stuff. But with psychedelics, you just take some shrooms or take some DMT and you're there, you know, without any kind of practice or anything like that.
Well, yeah, really interesting, like discussion around that question. Pretty enormous question, actually. And yeah, you know, in my work, kind of, I guess you could say like a sub area of research that I've taken a lot of class in and, you know, written a lot of papers about is mysticism in general.
Yeah.
Which includes, you know, the mystical experience, reports on mystical experiences, the people, the practices, the multitude of practices that exist. So I'd say I have a pretty, you know, I have a wide perspective on this question.
Yeah.
And I was thinking, I think about it a lot. I talked to actually my supervisor, Anne, about this a lot. And, you know, this question of is it legitimate or not, I feel isn't the best question to ask about like what people are trying to get at. Because people are kind of, I feel like what people are trying to get is like, is this a quote unquote like legitimate spiritual, or if you don't want to get away from the spiritual language, like existential, philosophical, higher level of consciousness experience. And, you know, I would say that if you're just talking about a state that you experience for a period of time, I would certainly say that there are many parallels between that and the states in which other practices, you know, whether it be prolonged, you know, like praying, or meditation, or, you know, dark like isolation, like sensory isolation retreats. There certainly are a lot of parallels. And that's actually what kind of got me into psychedelics in the first place, because I was very interested in, you know, Buddhist philosophy and in you know, in practice and learning more about that originally. And then I kind of come across these like, you know, writings on psychedelics and these experiences. And I actually, the one thing that really intrigued me is I said, oh my God, the language at the very least is similar.
Yeah.
So the trick though is how useful is language, and how accurately can it approximate these like very profound experiences, often which people come back in and they say it's ineffable. In other words, it can't be described in words. So that's kind of like roadblock one, which is difficult. But I would say after reading a ton of stuff, both in, as like quote unquote traditional religion and texts like that, and the psychedelic experience, there certainly are parallels that exist. However, I don't think that there is one kind of experience, or if there's like, think of it as like a pyramid of consciousness or a ladder of consciousness in which we linearly go up. And as we linearly go up, we become more expanded and have like a wider, I guess for this, a wider perspective, let's say. I don't think it's linear like that. I think that it splits off in a million different directions, which is why certain psychedelics have a certain flavor to their experience. Certain meditations have a certain flavor to their experience. And also, so that's the experience side.
Yeah.
And then you also have your experience is like what we see in the research, and like you read everything. How you come to that experience and how you interpret that experience in the moment is so intensely conditioned by the worldview you come into it with. So a good question to ask would be like, you know, let's say if we can hold like a constant, let's say the experience is our constant variable.
Yeah.
We've figured it out, we figured out the science, and we can produce the exact same experience for each person that comes into our study. Then the question comes, will the Buddhist and the Christian and the atheist, will they have the same, will their interpretation be the same? Will they have the same experience? And then that's where things get really sticky.
Yeah.
And then it gets really, really complicated. So Yeah, so I would say that the question around because it's a big question around like legitimacy. People are wanting someone to firmly plant their foot and say, yes, psychedelics are as a legitimate of an experience as like a spontaneous mystical or religious experience. And to that I would say that it can get you it can get you there. It can get some people there to have a very intense experience. I don't think you can say it's the same experience, because having the same experience, being able to say that is mean you have to standardize the mystical experience. I don't think you can standardize the mystical experience. So maybe I can say it rhymes, but it's probably not the same. But it can get you there. It can get you expanded beyond your conventional daily consciousness. And there's this like kind of metaphor, I guess, that I like, that kind of explain that I think it explains this topic well. And it's that, imagine that you are lost in a really dense forest, like a redwood forest, and you're really dense. And then being lost in this forest, in this metaphor, represents like your ignorance of the world and the universe around you. So what you can do is to get out of the forest, how do you get out of the forest? Well, you can climb a really tall tree. And you can climb this really tall tree, and then when you get to the top of this tree, you can survey the world around you, have this new perspective, and you go, okay, the way out is there. It's on that side of the forest. So what I think about psychedelics is that they can give you like the rope to climb that tree really easily. And they can bring you right to the top of the tree. You go, there, that's the way I can get out. The issue though, and the same thing too with, let's just take like meditation, because that's like what I'm very familiar with. Meditation can also take you up the tree in a different way, or maybe it takes you up a different tree, but it's still in the same forest, so you still get the same view. It'll give you a slightly different perspective, but you can still you can both identify the way out, right? The thing though, the difference though between, I'd say, like meditation, which in the world exists in these holistic systems, so like in Buddhism, Hinduism, actually many traditions have meditation as part of it, but they're embedded in these larger systems, right? That's the key point. But then you have psychedelics as kind of its own isolated thing here. So we both go up the tree, and then we go, okay, we know the way out, and we come down. The thing though is that once you come down again, you're in the super dense forest, and you quickly become disoriented. You know that there's a way out. You've seen it, so no one can tell you that there's not a way out. But you can't orient yourself to get out, but you know it's there. And so then the real thing where these more holistic systems kind of come in, quote unquote, the religious traditions, is that you'll get to the bottom and they'll be like, yes, but I also have this roadmap for you that can guide you, or this compass for you to also help you get out as well. And I think you can't disambiguate the experience or the state from that second element, the how to get out. And in my perspective, that's what the mystical experience is. Mystical experience is a lot of time, obviously in the name of the experience, people try to reduce it to just that moment. But my understanding and everything I've seen in my research, that moment is really just the start of the mystical experience. And then it's how it affects and dictates how you view the world and go about life continually onward from there. So you kind of have these two elements. So you have like basically the catalyst experience, and then you need to have a system in place that can capture like the essence of that. And kind of the way like an internal combustion engine captures an energy of an explosion, right? And then it puts it to work. The problem I find with the mystical experience that psychedelics have is that it certainly does have a mystical experience and boom, gets you up there. But then the problem is that, at least here, if we're just talking about, some person having a mystical experience in Ottawa, Canada, just on their couch, is that those systems and those practices that would proceed after that can make use of that new energy don't exist in the same way. So I guess I should say, in my perspective, you kind of have an element of that mystical experience, but it's that actualizing that's really important. Which is why, there are traditions in the world that have used psychedelics safely and effectively and spiritually for a very long period of time. But having the psychedelic experience is only one element of it. You need to
It's just a tool that you
integrate.
have to use.
So then kind of coming back to the question of like, is it like a cheat or not? I don't think that it's a very good question to ask, because it kind of betrays the fact that the people investigating it from that perspective, when I hear that question, my first thing is like, well, it doesn't sound to me like you're too familiar with mystical experiences in the big picture.
Yeah.
Now, that's dicey territory, right? Because in psychedelic studies, you have something called like the MEQ, the mystical experience questionnaire, right?
Yeah.
And that is a standardized experience. Like, you know, on a scale of 10, rate your experience of like oceanic oneness and stuff like that. So it's difficult because it's a question of language. You know,
Yeah.
are we talking about the same thing? Anyways, that was a bit of a roundabout. That's a really roundabout way of me saying yes and no.
No, you
Which
perfectly
is
worded out. And
super humanities of me.
no, it's complicated, but at the same time, like, you gotta try, like, you can't just say,
yeah.
I'm out, and
Yeah.
not think about it and just talk shit.
Yeah. Oh, well, that's the thing too. People can have these like radical experiences,
Yeah.
like just mind blowing, and even like religiously practicing people will have and use these things. Will have a radical experience that they can integrate
Yeah.
into their worldview or that system that they're operating in and try to make sense of the world. And even if you don't have that system, I think psychedelics can be awesome, because I don't think you need that system to go in.
Yeah.
But having such an experience and having that radical perspective and seeing that there's a way out, or seeing there's a different way of being, can catalyze you into trying to find those other ways of looking and seeing. Because that's a big thing, is that people will have those experiences and they don't have the tools to integrate them, because our society in general, the questions around existential questions, like those really big ones, like we don't really have those tools. And when people ask for those tools, they usually say, oh, you have to go to like, established Christian tradition or Catholicism or Islam or Judaism. And so I think people hunt for interpretive frameworks and ways to understand it after. I think that's really useful too. It's all part of the journey too. But yeah, I think that like, there are people, and I say these are definitely the minority. You can just keep taking psychedelics, every day. And some people have great success with that. Some people, it really negatively affects them. One of my favorite things when I was on DMT Nexus is learning about this thing called the hyper slap, which is basically people that basically don't respect DMT and take it a bunch. And if those who don't know, DMT is an extremely powerful psychedelic experience. And but if you take it too many times without respecting it and integrating it and working it into your worldview, you can basically get this thing called God smacked or hyper smacked, which is basically, the way I heard described to me is it's like the universe has manifested a fist and it just punches you repeatedly in the face for the entire experience, with the big lesson of, you shouldn't be doing this so much. You need to be a little bit more responsible. So there are consequences to
there you go,
to
guys. Respect the DMT.
Yeah. No, respect is huge. Huge.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
man. So let me ask you a fun question then.
Yeah.
So let's say psychedelics are legal and hopefully in 5 years, 10 years, and it's totally legal, it's totally safe. If you had to take psychedelics, what would you take, and who would you take it with? Maybe a celebrity or a famous person.
Ah, geez. Yeah. What would I try? Because I would never try anything unless it's legal. That's really hard. That's a really difficult question to ask. Honestly, I think it'd be really interesting to have. The thing with it being like legalized or decriminalized, right, is that you have a guaranteed purity, where things are being manufactured.
Yeah.
So that's where I would be more interested in studying or, experiencing maybe like more like synthesized stuff, like, like your DMTs, your 5-MeOs, like there's a whole bunch of different kinds of DMTs. So yeah, I'd probably try that in a more standardized setting. Maybe I'd try, like I've heard that, there's studies where they're trying intravenous DMT.
Dr. Strissman, right?
Yeah, which sounds like,
it's crazy.
That sounds like wow, like oh my god, the most intense experience for an hour. That would be crazy. So maybe that, and I think that'd be it. And then who I would have, oh god. See, the thing with like DMT, right, is that you're just
you're just gone.
So gone. Yeah. You're just so gone and like not there. So I would say that maybe that one, it almost wouldn't really matter who I'm with. Okay. But who I would, let's say something more like relaxed and easy. Let's say like psilocybin becomes, fully decriminalized and, people can have personal possession and all that stuff. God, I think I'd really love to have a psilocybin experience with Jennifer Coolidge. Okay. I just no reason other than I just think she's an extremely funny human being.
Oh my god, for sure.
I just think she's a really funny human being, and I wouldn't want to take a crazy amount, just enough to have kind of that experience. No, just because I think it'd be,
it would be fun,
goofy and fun. I just think it'd be a ton of fun, and I think that. I think it'd be really good because you can kind of tap into that play aspect of it, because play is super important for learning and growing. It's there's that time to have the super intense, sobering, to use that word, experience. But also there's a lot of value in playing because you let your guard down and you can make those connections and realizations. So anyways, that's what I'd say. Yeah, Jennifer Coolidge.
That's amazing. That's a good choice.
Would be my big one.
That's definitely a choice, man. So maybe final points. What book or movie would you recommend?
Oh, geez.
About psychedelics?
Yeah. Oh, that's a good question.
Or as an undergrad, for example, because as I mentioned, we don't have much of an access to it. Let's say a micro program or the courses that kind of relates back to psychedelics. So what us have to do in order to prepare us.
For prep.
Or a book or a movie or...
Well,
it could be anything. It could be...
Yeah. Okay. So I'll start with more kind of general and kind of online stuff because everyone can access it. Honestly, the reality of the world of psychedelic studies is I've come back to this many times, is that it comes out from the underground and from citizen science and people doing research on their own time. So you can get a very good, let's call it preliminary education or overview by just being online a lot, but being in those spaces that are very well established. Those websites I mentioned, DMT Nexus, the Psychonaut Wiki, and Arrowhead. Those 3 websites will be a really great starter because it can get you a good, kind of a holistic overview of it. Because a lot of these, the studies and stuff that eventually came out of psychedelic studies, kind of are inspired or informed, probably more than people would like to admit, by this underground research. Just kind of the nature of the beast of psychedelic studies. So that'd be a good place to start. Other than that, it'd be great to read, there's some classics. For example, you have LSD, My Problem Child, by Albert Hoffman. The first guy that synthesized LSD 25, right? That's a really interesting one. Understanding the history, what kind of where clinical psychedelic studies kind of erupt out of. And then if you want to kind of proceed historically after that, you could look at things what would be a good one? You have your Timothy Leary stuff, and your Richard Alpert, Ram Dass stuff. And I think that's interesting if you view it from a historical and cultural perspective.
Right.
That's where I think that stuff's really good to kind of know where things come from. But then you could also get into stuff like that same era, 60s. They have like, Stanislav Grof was a really big guy, right?
Yeah.
He's a bit controversial now because he's like, doing kind of very off the wall stuff, but it's very interesting to read. He's got like, I think he's got the 2 big tomes. They're just called Psychedelics. And those are, again, quite interesting as well. More kind of modern stuff, kind of, because that brings you up basically until like the total embargo that happens in like 1971.
Yeah.
And then things kind of go underground for a little bit. But then you have these other publications. There's like the Psychonauts Explorer's Guide by James Fadimon comes out. And that's quite interesting because that's a report. That's where you kind of get more into the more heavy clinical stuff where he's reporting. It's like a lot of it's like the phenomenological experience, which is basically a big word, which just means like the lived experiences of the individuals as they go through the trip. And he talks a lot about that, from big trips, small trips, microdosing. So that's a really great one. And I'm trying to think of other good ones. There's another great book called Paths Beyond Ego by Vaughan and Walsh. That's really cool. It's kind of a collection of essays that I think that's really good because it's not just about psychedelics. It frames psychedelics in this larger conversation of people interested in what consciousness is. So that's one. Yeah, and I think that'll get you mostly.
No, you gave more than enough.
Yeah, mostly
so
there. And then as for movies and stuff like that, Fantastic Fungi.
No.
That's a fun one. If you just wanted to see like a fun little documentary, that one's good. And even like, you'd be even surprised, like YouTube even's got like a ton of great stuff. The problem though, the real issue though, so like, if I go on YouTube, because I've taken so many classes and like done research and stuff like that, I have the ability to discern kind of like the good stuff from the not good stuff. And that's not because that's not because I'm like a genius or anything. That's just because I've been exposed to so much stuff that I can see what's kind of the made up stuff and like what's kind of supported by other people, which is difficult when you're undergrad. You don't have that that same skill set, and that's just purely a function of time of what you get exposed to. But so the reason I say is that YouTube's got a lot of great stuff, but you need to have a really keen eye because there's a lot of pop culture stuff that's kind of the most famous one, Joe Rogan, DMT, and that's not to say that it's bad or it's wrong, because some of these things are so subjective, and there are like good stuff that, for example, they talk about the DMT machine elves. The DMT machine elves come up a lot in DMT experiences, but I guess it's taking things with a grain of salt. That's what most things in psychedelic studies, taking things with a grain of salt. And there's no one's, it's an emerging field. No one's got the definitive answer. And experience is a really big thing. Like I would say, if you have to trust people, trust those with experience.
Cool. Well, thank you so much. There you guys have it. Please feel free to go check out those books, movies, and interesting website. Thank you again for coming to this podcast.
Thank you for having me.
I mean, I would love to talk about psychedelics for hours with you, but I know you have a busy schedule, and I don't want to keep you waiting here a lot of time, because hopefully we're trying to get a sponsorship as well, so we could have some drinks and
awesome,
take good care of our guests, hopefully in the future. So we will look forward to have you again in the podcast, and maybe later on once you have more stuff to talk about your research, and we would definitely look forward to
it'd be when I have more tangible research, because it's a bit out there. It's a bit out there right now, so probably everyone's kind of like, what is this guy even doing?
No, it's amazing, man. Like, it's definitely something to talk about in the near future.
Happy to talk. I'm the same with you. Talk about psychedelics forever.
It's amazing, and what we need to do is, I guess, try to like really explore the ideas, try to be humble, and try to be open. That's a big thing, and try to not. I mean, it's good to like state something at some point, but at some point we also need to like maybe be a bit humble and maybe talk
Yeah.
about more humanities aspect of
Yeah,
it, because that's a big
yeah.
thing in science. People are so rigid and they're like,
Yeah.
no, this is not true,
Yeah,
But
totally.
hopefully in the near future we get to that point.
Yeah, just about being open. It's psychedelics. It's a really big sandbox.
Yeah.
Everyone, lots
Gotta
of
be
room for
safe.
everyone to play. We don't need to fight.
Yeah.
Like everyone's got space, and we should all, talk. 'Cause it's such a fascinating subject, just because it refuses to be isolated to one thing. It's really hard for me to think about anything else that does that. So yeah.
Well, awesome. Thank you again, and hope you have a good rest
Okay.
of your week.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for listening to this conversation with Reid Barber. We covered his path from engineering into humanities, Buddhism and psychedelics through the lens of skillful means, tensions around the fifth precepts, and how we study religion today. We also talked about practical resources to learn more about psychedelics, all the way from classic books to online communities. This is the Dendrite podcast. To support it, please share this episode with your friends and anyone else who might be interested. We hope you enjoyed this episode and see you next time.